Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're welcoming back Joe Slack. Joe is a guest host on this podcast, a prolific game designer, and an educator. His latest title, Mayan Curse, is currently on Kickstarter. Joe, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Great to be back, James.
Oh, it's great to have you back, my friend. And I'm sure there's going to be some of our audience that's going to recognize your voice as being a guest host on the podcast. Oh, man. Is there anything you're not working on? Like, you have your hands in everything. It's crazy.
Let's just say the free time is very limited these days. But yeah, keep him busy, which is always good.
Oh, I can imagine. And I got to say, congrats on your latest campaign. Mayan Curse, man, it is really, just kicked off in high gear right on day one. So I was really happy for you there when you funded like very, very quickly. I think it was in a few hours. And myself, this is a game that I had the pleasure of actually seeing right in its early stages in our local protospiels. And so it's been kind of cool, kind of seeing that evolution right up to the point where it is now on Kickstarter. What's kind of cool to me is seeing a game that, although I know there's been a lot of changes, for the most part, it's kind of holistically the same game that I actually got to play myself at the Protospiel. There wasn't many changes you made to that, was there?
Not a drastic amount since then. Of course, the art and the design and the iconography and a little bit around more the Mayan culture and civilization, we added a little bit more to the game. But yeah, the game from an early stage, the concept of drawing some of these sacred stones, using them to match up to the slabs, sliding the slabs and making progress. That has always been part of the game right from the start. It's just been the other things, trying to figure out what kind of puzzles can we introduce? How are the temples going to rotate? How are we going to have people compete against each other? Should there be one thing they're all going for and fighting over? Or should there be multiple things they're going for? What are they actually trying to accomplish? Like those are the types of things we had to flesh out, and literally took years to go from start to finish to figure out exactly what the best system was going to be.
Oh, I can imagine. Now, I want to give a shout out to your design partner, Sylvain, as well. So maybe we can just give him a kudos. I know he's kind of your partner in crime now on a few of your titles. And I know there's stuff that's still coming down the pipe that I'm super excited about as well, that we probably won't cover on this podcast, but I've been able to get sneak peeks to, that he's also has hands in. So it's really cool seeing kind of you guys really finding this cool vibe between the two of you, that where you're able to play off each other. Is this something that you would recommend for other people in terms of how to do design, or kind of what's been your approach as it comes specifically to Sylvain?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you can find the right partner, it can work really, really well. I've worked with a few different designers, and it's been a great experience every time, but it's been always a little bit different. So I find if you can find the right partner that complements you. So for example, Sylvain, he just loves the crafting aspects. I'll show up at his place. He'll be like, I got this game. Can we check it out? I want to show this to you. Maybe it's something you want to work on together. I was like, cool. How long have you been working on this one for? He's like, oh, this morning. And it looks like almost a brand new, like finished game. Like it's a nearly finished prototype, because he just loves making things that look amazing. He doesn't care if it works right off the bat or not. He'll change it. He'll fix it. He just loves that aspect of it. Yeah. So he loves like that part of the game of it. He's got a lot of really cool ideas in terms of design and mechanics, and has a lot of experience. He's owns hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games himself. And then from my perspective, I come at it more from like the analytical kind of aspect. I've got more of like a math stats kind of background, and I really I'm into the mechanics and just trying to figure out getting things to work kind of mechanically first. So together we really pull like the mechanics and the theme together, and quite a lot of our games, you can really see those tied together really well. I also don't mind the interaction with the publishers and going out and publishing and pitching to them and that kind of thing. And he's more like being behind the scenes for that kind of thing. So we work really well together in the types of games that we like, in what we bring to it, what we want to do with our games. And so, yeah, if you can find that right partner that has those right matches and you complement each other and you're not just like both liking that very same aspect, you can really work well together. And it also encourages you to keep moving the game forward. Mm-hmm. Like he'll have an idea for a game and he brings it to me and I'll be like, oh, and then we can add this. And then he wants to make like the next version of the prototype and I want to test this next thing out. So it always just keeps things moving forward and getting excited about working on new projects together.
It still blows me away that he is a heart surgeon.
Yeah.
He's doing game design as a hobby, right?
I know, but you can tell in his prototypes how precision his cuts are and how he does such amazing things with foam board and indentations and circular cuts and everything. Like I can't do that. Like I cut things and they're all raggedy and jagged but he has a touch with that. So I guess it comes from all those skills.
That's a fair point. I don't think I've ever seen a prototype that he's done that doesn't look beautiful. I mean, I think the challenge in that case, I think I even brought this up when we were talking at the last Protospiel, is the challenge is that you almost set an expectation with how visually, I mean, the butterfly game that you guys have, it's obviously public. You've been working on this butterfly game for quite a while and you've seen a lot of these Protospiels. But how, how beautiful that game is. And I mean, production wise, you may not actually be able to get to that kind of a level, right? Is that fair to say? And do you see that as a risk at all, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you do set expectations and there's definitely been times where we put a game on the table and it hasn't played as well. And somebody's like, oh, I kind of expected this experience or something. And it wasn't quite there. So we try to, as best we can, test those games early on ourselves to make sure that they are at least functioning pretty well and hopefully at least somewhat fun, at least to us, before we bring it out to other people. So at least their experience will be at least decent. They can see where it's going. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you put something brand new in front of somebody and it just doesn't work, it's not functioning, they're going to be a little disappointed. They're going to say like, oh, it looks like you've been working on this for a really, really long time and it looks really good, but it doesn't play as I expected. So yeah, absolutely. There's an expectation there. I
guess the flip side of that is if you're going to err on one side or the other, you err on overproducing the game. I know that, and I'm guilty of this too. Like when I walk through like a Protospiel event and, I see something that looks polished, I'm more inclined to want to sit down and play test that than something that's just boxes on, drawn boxes on a piece of paper or something that's been sketched out. And that sketched out one may actually be a better game and even play better when you actually sit down and play it. But it's kind of that initial, how do I pull people in, right? And so anything you can do to improve that, whether it be, in Sylvain's case, where he's doing a lot of this creation himself, there's the game crafter, there's print and play, there's all these different services you can use to make something look, somewhat polished. And I try to do that with my games as well, as I can't think of the last time publicly that I had actually presented a game that didn't have some basic artwork and so forth, even if it's just standing artwork to give an idea what the story of this game is so that people are more enticed to sit down. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think like I have no problem bringing something that looks pretty rough, at least if it's functional, to like a game design event where I know it's just like other game designers and we're just kind of circulating between each other and playing each other's games. And there aren't like high expectations for the art and look of it. But certainly when we put out something like Mayan Curse or something else that has a really nice table presence, people walk by and they want to try it or they want to look at it or they're stopping by at least to look. It draws people in. So yeah, once you're past those early stages and the game's at least functioning, if you have something that looks good, I'll be honest, it does bring people in, whether it's, publishers seeing it, play testers, other game designers, you're going to get more eyeballs on it for sure.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about Protospiels before we get into the Mayan Curse itself. And we're going to do a deep dive on Mayan Curse because I think people need to really check this thing out. It is definitely a showpiece, right? When you see it on a table. But let's talk a little bit about Protospiels. There's no secret that you have a lot of games on the go. Personally, you and Sylvain working on, I've seen a number of them. How do you, there's going to be a two-parter. First is, how important are those Protospiels to you versus just going out to like a local cafe and play testing? And what do they bring to you that's different than maybe you would get at like a cafe?
Yeah, I think both are very valuable. When you compare the two, you look at maybe a designer event that they hold every month or a couple times a month. Those are much more frequent. Yeah. So you have those opportunities to get your game out more frequently. Quite often it's the same people, sometimes different people coming in, but they're just more frequent, but they're just much shorter. Usually you only have a few hours. Everybody's trying to cram their game in and get to everybody else's game. So hopefully everybody has an opportunity to play test theirs. Whereas at a Protospiel, generally those events are only once a year, and they are held all over the place. There's ours in Toronto, and then there's others across the US. So you can go to multiple of them, but each individual event is only once a year, and it's concentrated over 2 or maybe 3 or maybe even 4 days. And it's just a much more relaxed environment, I find, because it's not that real time crunch of everybody's trying to get their games in within a few hours. It's like, you have that much time. If you're a designer that just has one game, you can play it with like 5 or 6 different groups over the course of a weekend, and you can get feedback from all different people. You can, especially if you bring components or things you can change and tweak it on the fly. And then if somebody has a really great suggestion, you can implement that, and then a couple hours later be playtesting again with a whole other group. Or if you're like me and like Sylvain, where we have a bunch of different games, each one of them can get playtested. We can bring 5 or 6 games to a protospiel and pretty much expect every one of them to get playtested at least once, maybe even twice if we're lucky. It just depends on how many other playtesters are there, what everybody else's commitments are. I mean, and the thing about protospiels and all game design events is about giving time back as well. You want to give back as much as you're taking from other people.
Sure.
But those events just give you so many opportunities to play test your games multiple times in a more relaxed environment, and people are going out and getting food together and coming back, and it just really brings the community together in such a great way.
I often look at these two things. I'll get to part 2 in a second here, but I often look at, like game cafes versus pro spiels. I see them as both necessary to the process. From my experience, I find a proto spiel is often allows me to go pretty deep on some of the mechanics and some of the things that I may have not thought of mechanically in a game, whether this is going to work or not. On the flip side, sometimes I find that the people that are playing, or because most of them are game designers, sometimes will lean towards trying to almost push it towards something that they would want to create versus what it is, right? And that's where I find that the cafe approach, or getting together with, people who are just not necessarily game designers, but just people who like playing games and get them to try these kind of games, is more is this fun measure, right? And looking at it as the game as it is, as it was meant to be, and am I achieving that particular goal? That audience I usually find at the cafes and so forth, because they're not looking at it with this kind of granular microscope on, is every possible mathematical mechanic worked out, and is this breaking any kind of conventions and so forth. You kind of more that surface level feedback, and I think you kind of need both, right? I think they both kind of have to be considered. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, when you're looking at your game, obviously, the people that are going to be potentially buying your game, your audience, they're the people that have to really love your game and be there to back your game or buy it when they see it on the shelf. But game designers can also bring a lot to it as well. They have a lot of experience with different games, and they may have solutions to different things, or have seen different problems. And I've counted a number of times where somebody said like, "Oh, have you checked out the game Cheaty Mages, or have you checked out this other game? There's some things that are kind of similar there." Yeah. It's just to kind of lead you in the right direction, to say like, there's other games that maybe have solved this problem, or that maybe are a little similar to yours. You just want to be careful not to be too similar to that one and break out in a different way. And also have different ideas about maybe how a game might break, some different things about balancing, some really like core things that the average player might not pick up on. But you're absolutely right. A game designer can look at your game and give you suggestions in a direction that would be the game that they want to play, or the game that they would design. And, sometimes that would make a great game, but is it aligned with your vision? I always go back to the vision. If somebody makes a suggestion and it takes a game like in a totally different direction, and it's going to become like a take that kind of a game where everybody's attacking each other, and I'm like, that's not really what I wanted. I'm like, thanks so much for the feedback. That's an interesting idea. That might be a totally different game, but in my head, I know that's not the game that I'm designing right here.
They are very good at trying to break your game, I would say, which is a good thing, right? You want somebody to break your game. So let me just preface that with, that's not a bad thing. And so I do find the game designers are very good at that, right? As they will actually try to break the game. And I also like how they'll often say, I think I've played enough rounds to give you some feedback. Right. So you don't necessarily need to even finish the game. They'll play it enough so that they can say, okay, here's what my thoughts are on kind of the design of the game. I think that's good. What I've started doing, and both in terms of me asking people whose games I'm playing, and vice versa. If I'm demoing a game and I have a game designer walk up, I'll ask him this question. I will usually state the kind of mechanic the game is. Like, so my last game, Cities of Venus, had a, when mining, you had this random dice element to the game. And the last pro spiel I went to, where we actually demoed that game and wanted to get some feedback, and we made a lot of changes based on the feedback. It was great. I mean, there was some stuff in there that I hadn't even thought of. So it was a great experience in terms of just polishing that game before we launched on Kickstarter. But what I started doing is I started asking people before they sat down, because again, these are game designers, do you like random dice elements in games you play? And if the answer is no, then I'd say, you know what? It's okay. You don't have to play test this. You're not going to hurt my feelings, because I know they're going to come in with a very skewed view. Right. And likewise, same thing is I'll often ask somebody to describe this game a little bit to me first before I decide to sit down and play, because I know if it's a kind of game I typically don't like. So like fantasy type games, right? Or D&D kind of RPG games. It's just not my jam. Right. So if that's the kind of game it is, I'm going to do them a disservice by sitting down, taking up a seat, because all my feedback is going to be coming through a lens of, I don't really like these kind of games. Right. So for me, I try to both, kind of filter the games I'm going to play test so that I'm giving the best possible, user feedback that I can. Is coming from a very positive place. And likewise, if I have somebody sitting down, I'll give them a heads up of, okay, here's the kind of game that we're trying to create, this kind of vision. These are the kind of mechanics from the game. If that's not for you, hey, I'm totally cool with that. No worries. I'd rather have people that are interested in those kind of mechanics to sit down, give me feedback on, okay, now is that working or not? Is that kind of a fair approach, you think, Joe, or how would you approach that?
It can be. I mean, you never want to force somebody to play a game that you know they're not going to enjoy. They know they're not going to enjoy. So I think that's pretty fair, or at least to be asking people what type of games they play, or if they do sit down and play your game, whether or not they know exactly what they're getting into at the end. It's really helpful sometimes when they'll say something like, this isn't the type of game I normally would play. But and sometimes they'll have some insight. They'll say, but I actually like this part of it, or it was actually more fun than I expected because I don't really like this type of game. But yeah, I think that's totally fair. You want to try to focus on the people that are mostly going to be your core audience, and not, bring in people that would never buy or never play your game.
Here's an example. I'm not going to give you a specific example. I'm not going to name names. I'll give you an example. The last Pro Spiel, I can't remember if it was Time Splicers we were playing, or it might have been the Roll and Write that we're demoing. And there was one of the playtesters that I've seen, and I've been at a number of Pro Spiels with this person. So I'm starting to understand kind of their play style based on their feedback on other games. And there was an empty seat, and they're like, can we play? And I didn't go through that kind of initial kind of preamble. And the second they sat down, I said to myself, they are absolutely going to hate this game. Sure enough, at the end of the game, they're like, you know what? This isn't my kind of game. These aren't the kind of games I play. I really didn't like it. And I knew it just based on their styles. So for me, it's like, okay, I got to start just being a little more selective on either briefing people properly before they sit down, so they're not kind of coming in blind, or two, just being aware that, okay, this is, if I know they're going to hate the game, maybe I can focus on, get them to kind of steer them towards, give me some feedback on this specific element here that I'm trying to figure out. So that was my experience there. With I'm going to get now back to the part two of my earlier question though, which is, when you have so many games, how do you decide which one is kind of going to go next? So Mayan Curse is one of like 4 that I played at the last Pro Spiel, all of which I thought were pretty much ready to go. What was the decision process to kind of get you to say, this is the one we're going to go with now?
There were a few reasons we went with Mayan Curse. I think it's kind of as you were to say that the other ones you felt like they were kind of polished. We kind of felt that they were a lot newer, a little greener, maybe not like, starting off, but maybe not quite finished, polished games yet. Yeah. So we felt that Mayan Curse had a little bit more experience behind it. It was kind of more ready to go because we've been working on it for quite a while. So that was one of the reasons we think we had finally locked into what the right system was. And we'd been playtesting it. It was working really, really well. So we've kind of felt like there's not much more we can do to this game other than, continue to, dive down a little bit more into like the solo mode and get it kind of finalized, but it was otherwise pretty much ready at that point. And when I'm deciding to pitch a game to a publisher or publish it myself, one of the big filters I go through is it on brand? Does it match the Crazy Like a Box brand, which is really puzzly games that make you feel good. And quite often they can be played solo, but also with other people. And Mayan Curse hit that. And it also was similar to Relics of Rajavihara in that it was an adventure theme. It kind of felt Indiana Jones-like kind of thing. So it was like, okay, there's some attachments there too. So I don't have to go out and find a whole new audience. It's not like when I've got like a party game or like a very dry Euro, that's going to be pitched to a publisher that has that kind of an audience. That's what I'm going to go with. So it fit that mold really well as well. One of the things we're really considering is how can we present games that really stand out from others? Because, there's like 5,000 or more games coming out on Kickstarter every year. And Mayan Curse, it has great table presence. We felt a lot of people really were attracted to that. It had really great symbols and the sliding and the rotating everything. So those kind of things really made us think like this has a good chance. It stands out, it's different, and people are going to be interested in it based on the theme and the mechanics and how it looks on the table.
And certainly I think photography, and I'm just showing on the screen here for people who are watching live or on the replay, the photography, I mean, this is clearly one of those games that is going to photo well, right? And you're going to have some good marketing images for your campaign page. One thing that I did notice about this game is just the number of components. And I thought about this even when I saw this at Protospiel was, how expensive is this game going to be to make? How much research did you have to do on this one? Or did you have a good handle on how you're going to manufacture it? Like it's got kind of this wheel that turns at the end. You've got these different sliding pieces, which are double-sided and so forth. You got your bag and everything that comes with the game. So, there's some elements here that probably you haven't done, I don't think, on other games in the past. Was there any learnings here for you, or did you have this all kind of like scoped out quite well ahead of time?
Absolutely. I think and that was one of the questions too, when we were deciding on what was going to be the next game we launched, and we thought, okay, Mayan Curse looks like the strongest contender. And we had to go to our manufacturer and say, okay, how much would this actually cost to produce? Is this actually even feasible? Yeah. What would the price be based on, the cost for manufacturing? And, we got quotes back and thought, okay, you know what? It's actually within a decent realm. Yeah. It's a little on the pricey side, but it's going to look really great. And we thought that, backers would support it at that level. But there were definitely a lot of things component wise that we looked at, and we've kind of changed and looked at. We've got a lot of stuff that's going to be cardboard, but upgrading through stretch goals to wooden components. So like all the stele monuments and the cameras and upgraded meeples that we're working on the stretch goal for right now. So some of those things are basically, as we get more backers, we can go up to the next tier. So we can, instead of ordering 500 copies, we can order 1,000 copies, et cetera, et cetera. And when you do that, the price point gets better. So we can add in more stuff. So part of that was, okay, we're going to strip it down a little bit, but we know it's going to do well enough that we can add some of these cool things back in. And we've got some other things, some surprises that we don't want to say too soon, coming for later in the campaign if it does really, really well, that are going to upgrade the experience even more.
Oh, that's amazing. Can you explain to our audience kind of what Mayan Curse is and kind of the essence of how to play this game? I'm going to show it on screen while you're talking, if that's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a 1 to 6 player adventure game. And basically in the game, you are explorers trying to find this secret ancient city that can only be viewed from this temple that's been discovered. So you go in there exploring, and how you move along is you draw sacred stones from a bag, and these have symbols on them. And you have to match up these to the ones on the board. You get to slide 3 of the slabs, 3 spaces basically on your turn, in order to try to line things up. So you can try to get the furthest path to try to make the most distance up, but you can also collect knowledge along the way. So you're seeing these monuments along the way, and once you go past them, you get to pick them up, and you get the knowledge points based on them. And once you progress a little further, you're going to trigger some boulders. They're going to start rolling back towards the entrance. And as you're going towards the temple, you're going to have to make that decision. Do I go all the way to the top of the temple because all the monuments you're seeing, they range, they get better as you go along, up to 6 points, which is the max you can get. But then if you can get to the top of the temple and take a picture, you get one of these little camera tokens, and it's worth 15. So it's worth quite a bit, but you're taking a huge risk by going that far, because you got to still get all the way back out. So it's amongst all the players, who gets out before all 3 boulders have blocked the entrance. Whoever has the most knowledge points at the end wins. But doesn't matter how much knowledge you collect if you get stuck in the temple, because you're going to be trapped there forever.
Yeah, I can say when I played it, it was a blast, and I almost made it. I was right at the exit, and the last boulder closed off, sealed me in. So I was a goner when I played, but it was cool. I hadn't played a game like this before, which got me really excited, because I always love it when there's like a new experience, right? When you play a game and you're like, oh, this is something I haven't really done before. This is kind of different. That's a good thing, right? I seek this out constantly at my game nights, is try to find something I haven't played yet. I'm always saying to people, hey, if you've got a game that's kind of a little bit different than we've been playing so far, like bring it out. Let's kind of mix it up. Let's get some new experiences on the table. And this one, I would say, certainly gives you that kind of experience vibe when you're playing it, right? Like it actually feels like you're almost in like in a movie, right? Like Indiana Jones kind of going down the tunnel and the boulders chasing you as you're trying to run out with the treasure. It's super cool. Where did this idea originally come from? Like, how did you guys come up with this idea?
Oh my goodness. So years ago, Sylvain brought this prototype of it just had these sliding slabs, but they had letters on them. So instead of where you have the Mayan symbols now, you just had letters on them. And it was more like a casino kind of a feel. And you're sliding these things, trying to make words. And you had it was almost like on a slot machine where you have like the 3 lines that score. So you're trying to get the letters lined up and make words. And it was a really interesting idea, but it was like, I don't know if this can be like a fully fleshed out game, because how different is it going to be if you're just sliding the letters all the time? But it was such a cool concept. And then Sylvain went and took it away. And the next time I saw him, he had this really cool thing with these sliding Mayan symbols, and yet the temple looked very different. But I was like, well, what's this? And the first time I saw it, I was like, this looks like an Indiana Jones adventure kind of thing, right? Yeah. So he really matched the mechanics with the theme really well, and it really felt like thematic that way, and played it. And I had a lot of feedback for him on like what could be a little bit better and what was really cool about it. And played it a bunch of times, and he asked me to join him. He said, yeah, I'm kind of stuck on some things. I'd love to bring you on as a co-designer, because we had started working on some games together at that point. And so that was really fortunate, because I love the game. As soon as he said that, I'm like, yes, I love this game. And I can see some real potential in it. So it came to be all through these sliding letters at the start. And then it was just a series of different puzzles and different kind of modular boards that we added to try to figure out what was the best thing that players could do, that varied a little bit, but kind of stuck with kind of the same mechanics of drawing the tokens and trying to move along and trying to get in and out. And then the boulders came late in the game. Actually, we hadn't figured that part out yet. And that just did it for the game, because it really just gave that sense of tension. And there's always that point where everybody's kind of like, oh, do I take one more turn to go get some more stuff, or do I head back? And it's agonizing. And then people are trying to get back just before the boulders roll in. So we're really trying to capture that tension. And I think we've hopefully accomplished that.
Oh, it was tense. That is clear. So when you did this campaign, and I'm hoping you could provide advice maybe to some other people out there that are looking at doing their own games. And there's a big difference between when you obviously sign with another publisher and you just sign, you hand them over and let them take care of it, and when you're self-publishing games, right? Is there any advice you can give to people on specifically around bootstrapping, right? And on being able to save as much cost as possible going into doing campaigns like this, especially when it's being self-financed?
For sure. Yeah. Because I mean, as much as you're saving some costs, like not going out and getting it printed and like just trying to sell it on like Amazon or website or whatever, you have less capital costs, but you can definitely spend a lot of money between, your video and your graphic design and art and everything else. So some things you can do is you can do your own video. I mean, videos can be very, very expensive. So depending on your game, especially if it's something you want to show off, like with Mayan Curse and our previous 114 Frantic Minutes, we really wanted to show people playing the game. We wanted people to physically see, like, this is an actual physical game. It's not just something like digital. This is how people are doing it. This is how your experience is going to be like. And then intersperse some different things. Story blocks, which you actually told me about, has been great. We put in some some stock footage in of actual people walking in like jungles and Mayan ruins
to
and
Cal,
like
I think
that.
was some of that videos from, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So there's those kind of components as well. But yeah, like you can save a lot of money if you can record it yourself. You just have to, have good lighting and have a good script, what you want to say, that kind of thing.
Where'd you get your voiceover, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it was actually Ori Kagan, who I've worked with before on my Relics of Rajavihara videos. He recommended Peter, who did the voiceover.
Okay.
So yeah, it's great having connections too, and people who can make those recommendations. And it wasn't super expensive, but it added an extra kind of feel or element to the game, which I couldn't do necessarily with my own voice or just people.
Oh, the voiceover is great, and I think you hit it on the nose there. I think any advice you give to anyone out there would be network. If you can network and meet people in the industry and reach out to people in the industry and just, if you have a question, and make sure they're sincere questions, not, hey, here's a leading question to get you to give me free advertising on your Facebook page, but actually ask a question of, hey, does anybody know where I could go for voiceovers? Or does anybody have someone they could recommend? Things like that. The more you can network, the more the answers are going to be at your fingertips. Right? Like there is so much I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff I know where to find it and who to connect to get the answers quickly. And so it is so important to build that network out. And your video, I don't want to underplay that. I mean, your video is great. So it comes across very, very good, very polished. But you're showing the actual game. And this is what I kind of still scratch my head over. And no disservice to the animated, because I know there's, Ori's one of them that does animated videos, right, for a living. Yeah. But if you don't have the budgets, you were further ahead to put that money into advertising and shoot it practically. And, and I always use Tanner Yarrow of Yarrow Studios. He's now done yet another campaign that's in the millions of dollars. I think he's closing in on $3 million with his game tables.
Folding table, yeah.
Yeah, but most of his videos are shot practically, where he shows the actual thing, right? And you can do that. If you go and get a nice production copy made, whether through GameCrafter or however you're getting your prototype made, you can shoot that practically. On it, most iPhones are great quality. If you get the right lighting, you can have some good quality. Or maybe somebody out there that's good at doing video or doing photos that is way better than you, and maybe you pull in some favors. But there's ways you can bootstrap this where those extra dollars you have are going to be better served pumping that into ads, because the ads are what are going to drive the backers to the page in the first place in order to get those pledges. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I want to give credit to my friend Isaac as well, who's in videography. He helped with the video. We did all the recording and everything, but he did the kind of finishing touches.
Oh, nice.
Put everything together. But that's, a much more cost-effective thing than getting somebody to just do everything on your own. So we were able to get all the footage, and then he just kind of put in those finishing touches and did a great job, finishing that up.
Oh, that's amazing. Can you talk about what's next? Like, what's next up for you, Joe? Like, is it? I mean, I don't even know where to start. Is there a pro spiel coming up soon, or is there another game you're working on, or what's next up for you?
Oh, lots of things. Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about Protospiel as well. Protospiel North, when the next one's going to be. So that's probably going to be around May or June. We have to lock in when the date is. But I think the next big event is going to be my next virtual summit, 2024. So I'm starting to do the planning for that, and going to be reaching out for some guests and getting that all organized very soon as well. So looking forward to doing that. And that'll probably land around February 2024, I'm hoping.
Oh, amazing. Well, Joe, congrats so far on this campaign. I mean, gosh, you guys you've already smashed your funding goal. So that's a relief, obviously, on day one when you can do that. And I can't even imagine where this thing's going to end, but you're only halfway into your campaign, and it is just growing and growing and growing. So I want to wish you all the best. Can't wait to see where this ends, and look forward to seeing you at the next event, my friend.
Thanks so much, James. Always a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for the kind words.
No worries. You take care. Cheers.
You too.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge Podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.